Welcome back. And we're moving into our first conversation this morning. We're joined by meteorologist Tench, a well-known face, of course, as we discuss, of course, last night's event and just understand a bit more about tsunamis and the potential threats for Belize. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning,
And thank you for springing into action and being with us on such short notice. But of course, it's a great time to be able to take the experience and make it a teachable moment. So I just want to start off with, what were your plans last night? Were you calm and safe?
Yes. Calm and more or less prepared.
Yeah.
Actually, I didn't feel the tremor. My wife felt the tremor, and she brought to my attention that she felt it. My next response was to try and ascertain exactly where this earthquake occurred. And after going on the website, and the radio station also established that the earthquake occurred near Swan Island. My immediate thought was that there is a risk for a tsunami, because tsunamis generally form after you have an earthquake, especially an earthquake that occurs at sea. And so that was my initial thought. The radio stations eventually started issuing reports about the occurrence of the earthquake and the risk for the tsunami.
Yes.
And I heard the fire engine sirens later on for quite a while around the city.
Yeah.
So that clearly established in my mind that there was a risk for a tsunami, which can occur after an underwater earthquake. Yeah.
Now, let's look at what takes place to be able to increase the risk of a tsunami. And I think because what people perhaps have not been able to, or are trying to understand today, is what's the difference between the earthquake that took place last night versus the one in Mexico last year, where we also felt tremors.
Okay, the earthquake occurs when what they call tectonic plates rub against each other. There are several tectonic plates in this part of the world, and when these tectonic plates rub against each other, they create a disruption in the Earth's surface, and we feel it as an earthquake. Okay, you can have earthquakes occurring on land as well as at sea. This earthquake that generated the tsunami warning last night occurred at sea, underwater, and there's a fault line that you see there marked in green, which separates two plates. The plate to the north over the Gulf of Mexico is called the North American plate, and the plate that pretty much covers the Caribbean is called the Caribbean plate. So you have these plates rubbing against each other, and they move ever so slowly, but ever so often the jolt is sufficiently strong enough to generate.
And is there any reason why that it's slow sometimes, and then all of a sudden you have these faster movements?
There's always pressures of these plates rubbing against each other, and the uncertainty factor in when the rubbings of these plates are going to generate an earthquake makes it even more dangerous, because you can never tell precisely that an earthquake is going to occur. They're always, the forces of friction between the plates, like I said, they're always generating small tremors, but we don't normally feel them in the course of time. The only way you know that the tremors are occurring is if you have equipment established in your country or various points on the Earth's surface. Belize does not have seismometers, but places like Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador have a network of seismometers which are always recording these tremors. If you actually watch the equipment that they use, the pens are always moving because of the small tremors.
Yeah.
And when the tremors become severe enough, you and I feel like what we felt last night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, or proximity to those particular plates is what allows us to be able to feel the tremors.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I feel like it was probably within maybe the last 2 decades that we've really started to experience more of the effects of earthquakes. We feel tremors, and now are experiencing tsunami warnings.
Yeah.
Is there a reason as to why this has become now a part of our emergency plans?
Yes. If you recall, when you had the massive tsunami in December 2009 in Indonesia, where thousands lost their lives. Many nations in the world decided that as a conscious effort to establish some type of tsunami warning system or some type of network of warning system in place to prepare for the eventuality of a tsunami as disastrous as the one that affected Indonesia.
Yeah.
So the Caribbean nations under the Caribbean, I think CIDERA is the name, they probably changed their name now, but the Caribbean the Disaster Emergency Response Agency, all the Caribbean nations decided that, okay, we need to also establish some protocols and some type of warning system to prepare for the eventuality of a similar event in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
This was way back in 2009. I think I attended a workshop where Caribbean nations discussed protocols and the risk. And also some of the Caribbean islands are at risk more so than Belize for tsunamis because there are some fairly active underwater volcanoes in the Eastern Caribbean. So after that, the Caribbean agencies decided to collaborate more in setting up a warning system. I don't know how far advanced it is right now, but I imagine from last night's tsunami warning that the emergency management organizations in Belize have taken the risk for a tsunami seriously.
Yeah.
And it is a risk that is quite high, mainly because we're surrounded by water. Or many of the islands are surrounded by water. Belize has a coastline that's very close, as you noticed, to one of the fault lines.
Yeah.
And there will be future tremors occurring. And quite likely, a tsunami warning or watch will have to be issued sometime again in the future, because that fault line is not going to go away.
Yeah.
It's going to always be there, and like I said, the friction between the fault lines is always occurring, and at some point in time it's going to increase to a significant level.
As we begin to expand our awareness and understanding of earthquakes and tsunami threats, I think one of the realizations is that earthquakes take place quite regularly.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. This particular plate, how active has it been?
In terms of figures, I could not tell you, but we had a similar event with the same fault line a few years ago, where I think some parts of the southern district along the coast,
Placencia's road was broken.
Yes.
Yeah, there
some
were
houses suffered structural damage.
That was the last tsunami warning that I remember. I checked the date. It was May 2009, and it was. I remember the cracks in the road, and there was some infrastructural damage. We don't know if there's been any from last night, but that did take place in May 2009. Yeah.
And it's a fact among the scientific community in the Caribbean that, like I said, since the disastrous tsunami in 2009 in Indonesia, Caribbean nations, at least the scientific community, has been very aware of the risk for a tsunami occurring in some part of the Caribbean in the future, when or how severe, we don't know. But because of just such a likelihood occurring, and the fact that there are underwater volcanoes in parts of the Caribbean, not very active, but they say they're in a dormant stage, which means that at some time they could erupt suddenly. So the risk is there. Yeah. And because of that, the scientific community in the Caribbean has been aware of that possibility and has made efforts to set up some type of warning system, some type of network, probably as well developed as, say, with respect to hurricanes. Mm-hmm. So the risk is there, and it needs more, I guess, the political will to get that warning system better established.
And you mentioned that the risk will always be there. So how do we prepare for that then? How do we build our buildings, Mm-hmm. I know last night it happened and I was on my bed and I didn't move, And then my mom told me, she was like, I think you're supposed to go underneath one of the doorways or something. But how do we prepare? How do we prepare
or respond?
Okay. On an individual basis, there are certain guidelines that the public needs to be aware of. If you notice, if you felt a tremor, like I said last night, the minute I was aware of the tremor in the sea, in my mind I thought right away, there's a risk for a tsunami.
Okay.
And on an individual, you're at a seaside location and you are aware of an earthquake at sea, survival of your own self should take precedence to even waiting for a siren to go off or listening to radio.
Yeah.
I have a few guidelines here. One of them, it says, if you feel a strong earthquake, realize it can cause a tsunami. Mm-hmm. If you feel the ground shaking severely, you know that you have had an earthquake.
Mm-hmm. There it is.
You live along the coast, you may notice that the ocean water recedes from the coastline.
Yeah.
That's another telltale sign. It's all there for you to see.
Yeah. So if you see unusual, now I want to clarify this because I know this was a question that was lingering after the All Clear. Mm-hmm. We did have photos and videos from coastal communities showing that the water had receded, and I think people were concerned whether or not there was still a threat.
Still a threat, yes.
Explain to us: is this a normal occurrence? Can we expect that to happen? The recession of the water. There was no tsunami, but the water receded.
Yeah. Well, that is one of the telltale signs. The water recedes because of a reduction in pressure from some distance, and these effects take place long distances away from your coastal location. Yeah. This is one of the dangerous things about tsunamis, because the waves originate several hundred miles away from your location. So you might be on the coast and notice, okay, the sea's receding, things normal. Yeah. Hundreds of miles away, that wave is being generated and coming at you with tremendous speed. And it's dangerous more so along coastal areas, especially shallow coastal areas, because the effect of the wave will be more disastrous than hundreds of miles out at sea, where the depth of the sea is deeper. They often say that a tsunami in deep ocean can affect you and you're not even aware that the wave is moving through. But it's when the wave gets close to shallow coastal areas that the effect becomes more disastrous. And if you've seen pictures of the 2009 tsunami in Indonesia, the ferocity of those waves, what they did to buildings, how they just damage infrastructure. To answer your question on a personal level, if you observe these telltale signs, take action immediately, because you don't have the luxury of time to react, as say with a hurricane.
There's also a sound that it would create that people can listen for.
Yes, apparently there is a very distinctive sound. I've never heard it, but
I don't ever want to hear it.
What is it, like the waves or something?
There's just there's a loud sound that they said is usually right before. I mean, you don't want to wait outside for it.
And those would be some of the and like it says here, finally, once you hear those songs, move. Move as quickly as possible.
Well, this is part of, and we have to be very, very clear. I think since the last tsunami warning in 2009, and since there have been efforts in being able to add this into emergency preparedness. We had a conversation yesterday morning with Red Cross about preparing for emergencies, including tsunamis. I think the Belizeans are accustomed to having significant time, at least a day, at minimum a day, to prepare for a disaster. In the case of an earthquake and a potential tsunami watch, what's our time frame? How urgent is the situation?
Far less limited, far less limited, far less time actually, because the earthquake occurred last night close to 9 o'clock, and I think the reports were suggesting that any wave action would probably start around 10:30. That's just about over an hour, an hour to a half, if possible. In my mind, I think even an hour is not sufficient time, especially for a coastal location like Belize City. And while I was aware of the risk of a tsunami, where I stood last night, I shouldn't have been doing that. I should have already decided to head for the hills if I was fairly confident that a tsunami was going to occur. You really don't have the luxury of time. And the earthquake, it's not something you can forecast like a hurricane.
Exactly.
You have sufficient time. The level of technology with hurricane forecasting is so much better advanced than with earthquakes.
And in fact, I think this is one of the things that I saw as well. What has happened in our hurricane warning system is because it is more sophisticated, we have more better radars. We have a lot of people who wait for that definitive path for the path to definitively move across or near Belize before they spring into action. We don't have that with tsunamis.
We don't have that luxury of time with a tsunami.
Safety first, and if we had the all clear like we did last night, thankfully, you go back home. But I mean, for the people who are waiting for some sort of definitive response that we will be having the effect of a storm surge like wave, they're putting themselves more at risk, right?
That's right. That's right.
At what point can you really tell if there is a tsunami coming? Well, is that an answer you can give? You can be honest with me. This is an education lesson for all of us.
And you hit the nail on the head by saying it's an education lesson, because it appears some people took the warning seriously, some didn't. And it reminds me of, I wasn't born, none of us were born then, but with the 1931 hurricane, Belizeans didn't know at all or much about a hurricane. And so the disaster it put on us in lives lost and I guess indifference from much of the public. I think we're in that same situation with respect to the tsunami. We have not had a tsunami before. We had the warning last night, nothing happened, but that does not mean we go away with that indifference, or like you say, we take our time and wait until we're certain in our own minds that it's going to occur. No. One day our number will be up, and we will have to live with the consequences. Because, like I said, the fault line is there. It's not going to move away. And while we're feeling tremors and tremors and tremors, one day one of these tremors
Can be.
can develop a tsunami. So I would say the whole process of educating the public on the risk of a tsunami needs to be fast forward or emphasized to the public, because even the sirens that went off last night, a lot of people did not realize that
That was a tsunami.
that was a tsunami warning. That was a tsunami
And not
warning.
everybody heard it. I mean, you know, and kudos to the fire department and the police that sounded the alarms, and for NEMO and CEMO to kick into action.
Yeah.
But you know, in speaking with other people, not all my family didn't hear the siren. I called them and said, "I'm hearing a siren. It's a tsunami watch."
Yeah.
So obviously there'll have to be mechanisms in place, and also for people to know what to do
Yeah.
when they hear
Exactly,
the
exactly
sirens.
what to do, in the event of another tsunami warning, exactly.
Let me. Another issue is, as we pointed out, there's about an hour and a half where we were all collectively waiting and perhaps making preparations in the event that a tsunami would in fact come to the shore.
Right.
Is it always going to be that span of time? If the
no,
earthquake is
no,
closer or stronger, can it be? Will it be a shorter time?
Yeah, it can be. It can be much less than an hour, because once the earthquake occurred, and in this case, this earthquake occurred close to 9 o'clock last night, and the waves are being generated by the tsunami waves are being generated. Those waves move fairly fast. The speed of a tsunami wave is typically around 300 to 400 miles per hour.
Wow.
That's the speed of a jet aircraft flying overhead. So how far is Swan Island from Belize? About 500 or 600 miles from us. It doesn't take long.
Because when I heard last night that the waves would be around 3 to 5 feet, or at least that's what they were expecting.
Yeah.
I had like a sigh of relief, but now hearing that, I probably shouldn't have, been like, okay, just 3 or 5 feet. How devastating would it have been?
And usually that the first estimate of the wave height are usually underestimates. What the tsunami experts go and do is do another recalculation and issue a second report, because they base their first wave height estimate on where the earthquake occurred, how deep it occurred below the ocean's surface. And so many times that first wave height estimate is an underestimate. So they have to go back and do recalculations, which is why a second report came out with the all clear saying that we weren't in any danger.
Yeah.
So 3 to 5 feet was quite likely
A preliminary.
a preliminary underestimate. It could have been higher. Thankfully, it wasn't.
Wow.
So key things, that preliminary height isn't necessarily something that you should use to appease your perhaps need to take action.
Yeah.
And also, because this will be perhaps the lingering experience on what to do in a tsunami warning, we won't always have an hour and a half to take action.
I think, that's correct. One of the reasons the tsunami warning was issued is that among one of the protocols is that once you have an earthquake 7.0 or higher, the agencies immediately set about issuing a tsunami report. In water, yeah. And I think this is one of the reasons the tsunami report was issued last night, because this was a 7.6 magnitude, 7.8. Yeah, so that's clearly above 7. So there was the need for a tsunami warning to be issued, and whether you want to dismiss it as nothing to worry about, that's within the range, well above the range to issue a tsunami warning. Yeah.
And there isn't, from what you're saying, there doesn't seem to be as much predictability as to whether an earthquake will trigger a tsunami or not.
Yeah, the knowledge of the science is still there's still a lot to learn. Perhaps the best countries, the countries with the best and most well-developed warning system right now are Japan and the United States.
And Japan was devastated by a tsunami several years ago as well.
Yeah.
Now, what can one expect from, when we say a storm surge like wave, and we reflect on, let's say, our experience with Earl, people saw water rapidly rising within their homes, but not so much force. What can one expect from a tsunami? What are the dangers and the threats? Is it the height of the water, the force of the water, the speed of the water? What are some of the...
All of those things, all of those factors. The speed with which the water comes at you, the force and the destructive nature of the water on infrastructure and land surfaces.
Yeah.
It's quite disastrous. And I keep taking you back to the 2009 tsunami in Indonesia. That caused a tremendous loss of life. Many people were caught by surprise. And as I said, that was really one singular disastrous event that made many nations in the world make a conscious effort to implement some type of tsunami warning system or have some kind of system in place to prepare for the eventuality. And the Caribbean nations took that event quite seriously.
I saw on Facebook last night some people asking, will it come with rains? What can we expect? So could you tell us exactly what it is that we should expect in the event of a tsunami? How long does the water last? Do you just have waves and then they go back out, or does the water stay? It lasts. The whole tsunami event, wave action on your coastline or on your island, will last perhaps maybe a few minutes. But like I said, it's a fast-moving wave, much faster than the storm surge that you experience with a hurricane. And the wave heights are much higher, especially close to low-lying coastal areas with shallow water depth. That's where the destructive nature of the tsunami makes it felt most, because the waves are moving fast. Some of them are extremely high, have high what do you call it? The crest of the wave, and the destructive nature of and it's not just at a point. It's like a wall of water coming at you, and it affects several hundred miles of a coastline when it comes at you. It's I can't help but taking you back to the 2009 Indonesia, because that the images you saw on TV were so vivid. It made many of nations of the world sit up and realize we need to be prepared for the eventuality, even ever so slightly.
Now, looking at, and I appreciate that question in terms of how long, when it comes in with the force, it also sucks back out as well, right?
Yes.
When the wave recedes, which, so there's just a whole lot of damage that can take place. I want to go back to the issue of people being along the coast, because I feel where we saw a lot of preparation, curiosity got the best of us. I wanted to see as well, but I remembered some of the things that we needed to take into consideration. Why is it not advised that you go near the coast, even to see the 6 inches of receding water?
Because if you're on the coast when the wave comes in, you have very little chance of escaping. Like I said, the waves move extremely fast. And if you happen to be on the beachfront when that wave hits you, you can't do anything.
You can't outrun it.
You can't outrun it, no. So like I said, the last piece of advice on a personal level, feel, see, and the last thing you do, run. But you need to have, calculate in your mind, when do I start to run?
Don't just run aimlessly.
Just don't run aimlessly, but decide to run once you've established all these things, you feel, you see, you hear, and you decide, okay, I need to run. I need to get away. And there's not much time. There's really not much time.
The advice was also issued by NEMO yesterday. It advised people to find shelter in a concrete second floor building.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So a wooden structure wouldn't be able to withstand that type of force. So finding relatives, going to shelters with a concrete structure. But there was also the advice of minimizing movement around, outside, I should say, and also not on bridges.
Bridges,
How was that?
Yeah, because you're standing on a structure that is over a body of water, and the wave is going to cause the water level at that river to rise, and you may very well become a drowning victim.
Yeah.
You're exposed to the risk of the waves, even if the bridge is not directly along the coast, but the waves will generate waves within that water body, the river underneath the bridge, and you could very well be a drowning victim after that.
Now, I must admit that last night I thought to myself, this is where our reef is going to help us. Because we often hear it in hurricanes that when there's a storm surge, the barrier reef does exactly what we call it. It provides a barrier, breaks up some of the storm surge, and we don't get as devastating an effect.
Yeah.
Is that the case with the tsunami?
Not to a great extent. To some extent, it may dampen the force of the wave coming at you. But this wave travels very fast, and it travels quite a distance from further away from the coastline. So it may what the reef, and we don't know yet because we've not experienced a tsunami, but there's some tsunamis in parts of the world where, depending on the orientation of the coastline, like Belize City juts out. If depending on the angle at which the wave approaches the coastline, it may even cause the waves to curl around and hit you at locations you don't expect. Normally the wave is coming straight as a wall of water. But say you have like Belize City juts out.
Obstruction,
It may do something that we don't know yet, but it may break up the wave at one side of the coastline and cause the waves to generate impact on another part of the coastline with even more disastrous effects. So, and these are things that even the seismologists and tsunami experts don't understand too well. How when the waves move on the water's surface, sometimes the seafloor is smooth, sometimes the seafloor has small sea mounts underneath. That has an effect on where the wave is eventually, or how the wave is going to be modified. So it remains to be seen. I mean, just thinking about it, I would say maybe our barrier reef would dampen the ferocity of the wave before it reaches the coastline. But remember, inside the barrier reef, our water depths are not that great. So there's still the risk that wave could, and it's low-lying coastal areas that feel the effects of the tsunami wave more so than areas out in the deep. Like I said, many times there's tsunami waves in the deep ocean and you don't feel it. You're not aware that it's a tsunami wave, but the closer it occurs,
you have more height.
The waves are higher and more destructive.
So looking back on some of the preparation mechanisms, and I think we were commenting, whether people, I felt that some people, or some of us felt more panicked than others. Some of us were too lax about it. So I think that there has to be a medium in between. So let's talk about what are some of the best things we can do to prepare ourselves in the eventuality that we hear that siren again, that we know exactly what to do.
Okay, if you felt a tremor, and it's a personal the first thing is a sensation. If you felt a tremor, and once you've established where that tremor occurred, and like I said, tremors are going to occur in the future because just the physics of where we're located. If you feel a tremor, recognize that something has happened. If you're close to a coastline, make observations about what you see, what happening with the sea. The third thing, decide what type of action you're going to take, if you can take preventative action.
So if I know I'm in a bungalow home and I have a tsunami plan in place, like I have a hurricane plan for my family, I would know if I'm in a bungalow, I would definitely need to find higher ground.
Exactly, yeah.
If I'm along the coast.
Yeah, exactly. Establish what are the conditions under which you live. Yeah.
If I'm in a wooden structure, even if it has an upper floor, I know I would need to leave.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And how quickly?
That that part. I think about how I reacted last night. Like I said, I realized the risk for tsunami even before the sirens came off or started announcing. And I took the siren warnings as a way of preparing people for the eventuality. It's never happened before, but and the strength of the earthquake itself set off in my mind that this was a fairly powerful system. So I would just prepare to take action.
Yeah.
And move away from the coastline. Like you said, you heard the reports about people playing along the coastline. That's foolhardy. That's foolhardy to say the least.
What do you need to take? How long? I mean, that was one of the questions I got as well. Obviously, important documents is always one of the things that you can be better equipped to take with you. But we saw people filling up their cars. I know that people were trying to make sure they have credit on their phone, food supplies, you know, because as I said, we're only accustomed to what we do in the event of a hurricane, which is meant to have you survive for a couple of days post the storm.
Okay, let me look at it this way. Okay, what happened last night? Some people reacted wisely. Some people not so wisely.
Okay.
Like I said, we're going to have future tremors. How strong these tremors are going to be, I don't know. And the emergency agencies are probably going to issue tsunami warnings again in the future. So the takeaway from last night's event, I would say, be prepared for the eventuality and be prepared to move quickly then. Or react quickly if we get another tsunami warning. If you're asking me how quickly,
no, but you should move when you hear the warning. And in fact,
you probably have maybe just a luxury of about an hour. Maybe less. So, and perhaps the same type of preparations you do with a hurricane. I mean, a hurricane is different in that we have a season. The warning services are well established.
You have at minimum a day.
Yeah, you have a minimum of a day. So the same type of preparations you do with a hurricane, just fast forward them with respect to the tsunami. Like packing all your personal documents, filling up your vehicle, and getting your family members alerted. Another thing maybe the agencies would probably want to consider for a future tsunami warning would be to issue these mass text messages, because we have so many cell phone users in this country
Fantastic idea,
that people who did not hear the sirens
Would at least get a text.
would at least get a text.
Yeah.
Because in the other countries like United States and Japan, the system is so well established that text messages, radio stations, television stations, pages, everything, all these communication devices are in place that people have enough methods of getting the message out, being made aware of the
And in
risk.
all fairness, this is a new threat for Belize, so we're really developing the best system as we go along.
That's right.
In fact, I saw the tsunami warning reported from other news agencies before we had the official word from Belize. So we know that it took a bit of time. Thankfully, we didn't have an eventful night last night. Thankfully, we saw people taking action, which I think is really
commended
great.
for being proactive because
the Met
shows
Office, NEMO, CEMO, shelters were open. And I love your idea about the mastics, because there was actually, there were quite a few people who slept through the tremors. And, you know, my sister, for example, I had to wake her up when there was a tsunami warning. So it won't mean that people will necessarily be, it could happen 2 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, anytime. And the uncertainty factor in a tsunami, we don't have a season like a hurricane. There's a season for the hurricane. Tsunamis can occur any time of the year.
So really, it's just to be prepared.
The watchword is being,
One thing that stays in my mind, and Charlie and I were talking, we had this conversation yesterday morning with the Belize Red Cross about emergency planning for hurricanes and all other eventualities, including tsunamis. And one of the things that Mr. Hunter from the Red Cross spoke about was simply keeping a bag packed, which he calls an evacuation pack. What is essential if you ever need to move. And perhaps with yesterday's event, we now will take that into consideration.
Put the tsunami on the same level of disaster as, say, with a hurricane.
Mr. Tench, thank you so much for coming in. It was such a great opportunity for us to understand about earthquakes and tsunamis and the threats that we have in Belize, especially since we have the attention of the nation with last night's scare. So we really appreciate you coming in and sharing this information.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Right. We're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking to representatives who are hosting a drone training workshop. That's coming up after the break. So stay tuned.